No, because doomed romances that haunt the narrative are and continue to be my favorite thing. So we're going to talk about Beatrice from a series of unfortunate events. That's right, this is a very fascinating dialogue, and we are talking about Lemony Snicket and Beatrice, who we later know to be Beatrice Baudelaire. If you're new here, hi, hello, my name is Max. I talk too much about books on the internet under the name Gemma Tate, and today we are talking about a series of unfortunate events. Now, we meet Beatrice in the very first dedication of The Bad Beginning, but it's not fully revealed officially until the end, the last book, that the Beatrice who's mentioned in all of the dedications and in all of the letters and little snippets and bits and pieces that are scattered throughout the 13 books, that is the same Beatrice as Beatrice Baudelaire, the Baudelaire siblings' mother. And that is interesting because we know that the Baudelaire siblings' mother is married to Bertrand Baudelaire. And we also know that Beatrice, as mentioned in the letters, had a years-long flirtation, situationship, maybe love story with Lemony Snicket. And I say maybe love story because it was genuinely a love story. There's zero question about that. But it was never going to play out to the end the way that Lemony wanted it to. I'm not sure if it's that he loved her more than she loved him. I think it's pretty well implied that they loved each other. She was an actress, he was a theater critic at the Daily Punctilio, and they were passing each other coded messages in theater reviews, which is adorable and also insane. And even more than that, I mean, they both grew up in VFD within the organization. They worked together for years, and they go back to the time before the schism. They grew up with, Lemony Snicket's siblings and with Count Olaf. And when everything went completely sideways, Lemony and Beatrice were still on the same side. But what went wrong between them? Because we know that Lemony asks Beatrice to marry him. And Beatrice not only says no, she replies with a 40-page letter detailing all of the reasons why getting married would be a bad idea. And then not long after that, Bertrand Baudelaire proposes in a very similar matter to Lemony, and she says yes to him, and she decides to stay put in the city, and they raise their kids together and all of that. So what's the deal with Lemony? Why does he say no? I am pretty solidly convinced that it's because Beatrice killed Count Olaf's father and allowed Lemony to take the fall for it. I don't think that Beatrice killed him on purpose. I think that she had a poison dart and it hit him by accident the night that she stole Esmé Squalor's sugar bowl. And Lemony took the fall for it, went on the run, and Beatrice, felt so guilty about sending Lemony on the run because he did that because he loved her. That's the reason he goes on the run. It's the reason he takes the fall for her. But it also leads to the snowball that kicks off the entire titular series of unfortunate events. Because if Beatrice had not killed Count Olaf's father, Count Olaf would have sided, or at least might have sided, with the good guys when the schism broke VFD. Because remember, Olaf and Kit Snicket were together. He loved her. And that's made very, very clear over the course of books 12 and 13. And Kit is pretty firmly on the side of the good guys, although she understands where Olaf is coming from. Olaf sides with the Firestarters in part because he can't separate Kit from what he perceives to be the actions of her brother, and Olaf believes that Lemony killed his father. So that's, to some degree, what kicks off the series of unfortunate events, because if Olaf doesn't side with the Firestarters, most of the bad things that happen to the Baudelaires don't play out. That said, I don't think that Olaf is the one who burned down the Baudelaire family home. I actually think that one's pretty solidly Esmé Squalor, who we know is also an actor, who we know has a rivalry with Beatrice. Beatrice is regularly cast in shows, and Esmé is her understudy. We also have a couple of iterations where Beatrice is in a show, Esmé replaces her halfway through the run because Beatrice goes off to do something else, which we can later interpret to be a mission for VFD or going to take care of her family. But to Esmé, Beatrice is a bully who's uncommitted and also who gets all the roles that Esmé wants. And then Beatrice has the gall to go steal her sugar bowl. And then with the tunnel connecting the Squalor's penthouse and the Baudelaire, like it makes sense that Esmé could have and had motivation to. Not the point of all of this. Anyway, Olaf, in so many ways, had chances to do the right thing, had chances to be on the side of the angels. And in most cases, the reason he doesn't do it is because he believes that the angels are not so angelic. If the people on the good side of the schism are so good, why did his father die? Why did his lover betray him by siding with the person who he perceived killed his dad, Lemony? And when he does finally figure out that it's Beatrice, which he does figure out, Olaf doesn't necessarily blame her, because at that point, he's gotten so good at separating out personal motivation from ideological motivation, and he then believes that he is fighting the good fight from an ideological point of view. And we get that breakdown in the end when he's parsing through his life choices, and he says something to Violet that's like, wow, you guys are so like your parents. And he doesn't really mean it as a compliment. And that's when we have to remember that Olaf grew up with their parents, and Olaf perceives his own relationship with Kit as the grandest love story of them all. And that's a recurring theme through the series, that the story that we see play out in a series of unfortunate events is one story in a much larger, much grander world with a much, much bigger fight. We're constantly getting these glimpses of a bigger, grander fight, that VFD is one organization of many, and we only even really get glimpses of that. But we can also see throughout the letters and the excerpts and the dedications that Beatrice and Lemony's love story is absolutely a foil and a pretty direct comparison to Kit and Olaf. And it's the love story that haunts the narrative. I mean, none of the events of the series play out without Beatrice and Lemony. If we are to take Lemony Snicket at his word that he's narrating the story, that he's backtracking everything that's happened to the Baudelaires, even that is being done as an act of love to Beatrice. So we have Beatrice killing Olaf's father, Lemony taking the fall, Beatrice marrying Bertrand Baudelaire because she feels so guilty about this situation that she has placed Lemony in, whether he likes it or not, which is how we even have the Baudelaire children in the first place. Then on top of that, you have Olaf, almost all of whose motivations are derived from his feelings about his father's death, who goes in pursuit of the Baudelaire fortune, partially because of the ideological motivations, but also partially because he's working with Esmé Squalor, who had personal big fat feelings about Beatrice. And so much of the story comes down to the way that this doomed romance between Beatrice and Lemony just permeates the narrative all the way through it. I think it's so powerful that you don't find out for sure until the end of the story that Beatrice is Beatrice Baudelaire. And also that maybe Beatrice Baudelaire was not the perfect shining exemplar of everything good that of course her children perceive her to be, but that Lemony, who knew her so well, who was so in love with her, is fully aware that she wasn't perfect, that she had her issues. There's just so much that's so interesting to dig into with these books, particularly with the relationships between the older adults. I actually think that's where the much more interesting story is what do we know about these characters? And the pieces that we have to draw that information from are not just a series of unfortunate events. We also have the Beatrice letters. We also have the All the Wrong Questions series. And Beatrice appears in very, very few of those, but where she does appear, it's almost always in the context of somebody else talking about her. It's almost always in the context of somebody who loved her, but is seeing her flaws and registering the ways in which she is dangerous. And I just think she's so, so fascinating as a character. I also think that if you start reading the books with the assumption that maybe one of the Baudelaire parents made it out of the fire alive, which I think it's really interesting that the Netflix adaptation went that route with it, that like, if you look for the clues, maybe they're there. I also think it's very interesting that they changed the timeline of the prevailing theory that makes that make sense. Because I think that you can imply that Beatrice survives the fire at the Baudelaire home in the books, and then goes to a costume ball, is apprehended at the costume ball by somebody on the other side of the schism, goes on the run from there, which is why she's not intersecting with the children. And then there's a patient on the list at the Heimlich Hospital whose name is an anagram of Beatrice Baudelaire, and when that burns down, I think we can safely assume that she doesn't make it out from that. But the Netflix adaptation places the costume ball at the wrong point in the story to have that confirmation that Beatrice is there. Anyway, that is my quick little breakdown of Beatrice Baudelaire. If you want more very fascinating dialogues, more commentary on a series of unfortunate events, please just let me know in the comment section, because I may have finished reading these books in 2006, but that does not mean that I don't think about them daily. Among other things, Lemony Snicket is the reason I know how to write a good thank you note. And with that said, I will catch y'all in the next one.